imprisoned in her thigh. A past in which she did not know that the mass would morph into cancer. Mosquitoes bit our cows. I slapped and slapped. But my mother, as she talked, bore the pain. She has lived on the earth almost longer with the growth than without, nursing it, carrying it, like a prolonged pregnancy. She looked up at the star-brimmed sky as if it were not me she was talking to. I looked up too. It was drab and cloudless. She raised her hand to her bald head, stopping so close to her scalp as if to touch her imaginary hair. Without looking at her, I could see her tingling fingers searching for corners that once were there. This poem is titled My Father's Clothes. Because the growl of thunder was distant, I completely ignored it. Sitting in the dining room with my mother while she recalled the story about my father. Dust ambled into the room, carrying the news of rain. Even though she would travel to Zaria the next day for her biopsy, she had washed my father's clothes in the morning and was now waiting for them to dry. Clouds, dark and vast, congregated outside so that through the open window, clouds, dark and vast, congregated outside so that through the open door you could see the light green algae on the wall turn olive, and then minutes later into something ominous. The wings of termites reflected the evening light. What about the clothes we washed? She asked me, limping from the sitting room to the front yard, her gait lopsided, her right leg bending to carry the weight away from the left. Sit down, I said. Let me bring in the clothes. But when has my mother ever listened? Even with the pain, she hurried outside, trying to move faster than the rain. The growing dark swallowed her the way a grave swallows a slowly lowered coffin. The next poem is titled Nomenclature of My Mother's Pain. My mother is in ruins, even though she is putting up an appearance that says the opposite. I don't want to imagine the barb of pain in her thigh when she tries to sit, when she tries to stand. She can't walk a few feet without crouching, without looking for someone to hold on to. When she half admits that she could hardly stand while she was at the market, I know this is code, that it is at its threshold, that she is at a cliff and a puff of wind could knock her off. Mommy, talk about your pain. She has taken her third painkiller today. She has an ulcer that new medications won't allow to heal, yet she will fast. Her son cannot ply the tiger's mouth that is the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway without her express prayers. Her daughter cannot be writing exams without God being alerted of this precious time. Her son needs a new job. Her niece in worry is dying. These people need praying. She can never palm her rosary enough. My mother comes back home needing a drink, a sweating glass of Pepsi, even though it will feed the cancer in her thigh. A doctor permitted her a few sodas in a week. I don't understand her smile or why she would be submerged in pain and wouldn't want to admit it. Who did this to our mothers? What is the source of their forbearance? I keep a plate of food before her, but she wants to know if her daughter passed her exams. Mommy, don't worry about that, just eat. But she insists. How was the exams? The doctor couldn't believe the results of the CT scan, wherefore the 56-year-old was shocked at the strength of her heart. When would they proceed with the chemotherapy? When would they proceed with chemotherapy? Was the first thing my mother inquired. She's so sure she will survive the chemotherapy. The seed-like tumor has been in her thigh for 27 years. Why would we suddenly believe it could snuff her out now? Was it merely because the doctors had bestowed on it a name? So this one is titled Memo, and I wrote it out of an exercise where I had just moved to the US, and so yes, when you're traveling to the West, there's this advice they typically give to you. It comes in the form of, when you go there, don't marry Americans. And yeah, they give it because they expect that when you go there, you find another Nigerian to marry. But in my own case, when I was moving here, I was mostly told to not forget my mom. Yeah, so that was how this came to be. It's titled Memo. Call your mother. Make her believe that she is not desolate in her illness, that while she thumbs her rosary in her room, someone rivers away is listening. Everyone kept on saying, before you left, to always remember her, as if you could forget the wet clay from which you were molded, as if the gopher would forget its burrow in the ground during a wildfire. Tell her you remember how she mashed fried rice with her fingers before putting it in your mouth, even though you don't remember. Tell her you saw her in your dream last night, telling you a story in an idyllic setting. Set the story in the land where she was born. Listen to her sighs while you tell the story. Pause for effect at every turn of the plot. Allow her to delight in it like a woman relishes her first bowl of pepper soup, brimming with large chunks of fish and chicken after she has just given birth. The kind of soup that is believed to seep into the womb and heal the cracks, to make the room habitable for another child. You may have given a fine rendition, but don't cut the cord yet. Be obedient, child. She might not believe that you dreamed about her, but she will not say. Allow her to laugh. And the last part. This is also It was also the last poem I wrote. When this manuscript had won the prize, this poem was not in it. And then my mom asked, and I asked to write this, and so I wrote this poem and asked if I could include it in the collection. It's titled The Last Thing. The last thing my mother asked for before she passed was food. My brother left the room to obey her request. By the time he came back, she had left, as if she did not want to do the business of dining in his presence, like a parent distracting their toddler with a toy before sneaking out of the house. She would not let him see her go. By the time he was back, her eyes were closed, as if she were just momentarily dozing, her body warm as an ember, glowing in the dark charcoal bed of the grave. Thank you.
I like to take a picture of every reading because when my heart fills up with despair, I like to look at the pictures of the readings because people are still going out and supporting people who make things, and that makes me feel happy. So thank you all for coming out. I'm gonna fix this microphone. I'm very bad with microphones, so let's see if I can do this. I'm 5 inches taller than every poet. Oh, I broke the microphone.
Just tap on it a bit.
I like this is. All right. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. So before I get started, I want to say thank you to Annie and Rachel and all the folks at, I want to say Majors and Quinn. Thanks. And Okwudili for sharing the stage and for writing such a beautiful book that honors your mother, and because I love moms. Oof, do I love moms. And everyone who came out, and especially my sister who's been hosting me all week and has not yelled at me one time. The book that I'm going to read to you from my collection is conceived of as a braided elegy that is exploring the death of a brother to an alcohol-related car accident, a father to down-under-related cancer, and then a collapsing system of inherited faith. And it's all kind of set in the southwestern desert. I was raised in rural Arizona in a Mormon community, and so that's where much of this book takes place. And the poems that I've selected to read tonight kind of follow the one strand of the father's death, and there's a lot of parallel, I think, between our books, and a lot of differences, but some parallels between our poetry. So I'm going to begin with a poem, that is called Still Small Voice. The June bug she finds tangled in a knot at her scalp has sticky legs and a carapace so thick she can hear her fingernail click against it. When she reaches up to scratch the tickle in her hair and startles her praying family with a scream, does her father think the Holy Ghost moves through her? The Holy Ghost does not move through her. All those late nights, she only hummed gifts at the little string because she was afraid of the dark. Give away, oh give away, she whispered, until she convinced herself she might become invisible through service. And outside her window, where the wind moved through the eucalyptus that baked all day in the valley heat and scented the yard with honey and pine. She decided the Holy Ghost could live there, not within her, but near, and between them, a curtain she could draw. Now, her father marches her from the family room, untangles the beetle from her hair, and laughs until the corners of his eyes seem etched with Hebrew shem, as he gazes with wonder upon the June bug, pinched between his thumb and finger, its barbed legs rotating mechanically in the air. So if you weren't raised in the Southwest or you're unfamiliar, downwinders were people who lived downwind of all the nuclear testing that happened in Nevada. And just for a little bit of context, my father was born September 12, 1944 and died October 10, 1993. And the Manhattan Project, the first nuclear test, was 1945. And the last nuclear test in the United States was September 23rd, 1992. So my father's entire lifespan happened within the context of nuclear testing and downwind of nuclear testing. And a couple of years after my father died, my mother received $50,000 from the United States government for his death, and about 60,000 American people did. And that's where the term downwinders came from. And all 5 of his siblings died of downwinder-related cancers. So this is a longer poem with 3 sections called Daughter of Downwinders that sort of explores his chemotherapy within the context of the downwinders. Daughter of Downwinders 1. Mind pitted by the fentanyl drip, dripping reprieve into his burning body, my father loses the thread of time and mistakes me for a stranger, standing beside his hospital bed. I tell him, remember, I'm your daughter, and he demands that I prove it by showing my back to him. So I, obedient to the very end, turn, unbutton my blouse, and tug it down till the small, worn stones of my upper spine and the shadows between my shoulder blades are revealed to him. But before all this, I once brought my guitar to his room so I could play for him. Halfway through the first song, my throat opened like a gate and a stone fell out. I thought I heard a violent flutter of wings, but it was only footsteps rushing to the doorway where 3 nurses appeared, breathless, and one said, "Oh, honey, we thought he had died and you were crying." And my father couldn't stop laughing. My father found it delightful. 2. In Apache Junction, my great-uncle pulls his broken washer from the wall and is stung by a small bark scorpion. His heart fails. His wife finds him dead in the mudroom where a honeyed light pours through the dusty window over his old body. She commands him to live, and he obeys because he fears her more than he fears God. I'm starting to think I can't die, he tells me, from the only chair beside my father's hospital bed. And then a silence opens between us, and my father's body, glowing with radiation, falls like a star right through it. 3. In the undeveloped fields along Rio Salado, Ocotillo buds dart from their stems like embers escaping a fire. I drive 5 miles an hour below the speed limit under an evening sky darkening in raw seamed layers. Somewhere deep in the bluffs, I know the clean sails of the sacred datura are pinwheeling open, their spiny seed pods hidden at the base of their stalks, their blooms the size of a newborn's head. I used to believe if I could only master the arcane art of being a daughter, it would be enough to fix my father. But today, I watched his vision worry a small tear in the veil, beyond which he said he could see his dead son's headlights swinging back up our old driveway. In the bluffs, datura blooms, and deep in his bed, my father's face brightens to see his son finally returning to him, like a detonation in reverse, or a flower closing, or a sky blue pickup rolling up the side of a cliff. Inside, my brother, beloved skull intact, tuning the radio, drunk and laughing. And then at the end of the book, I have a longer sequence, and I'm going to read the first and the third part of that. The first is, the poem is called The Exodus of Sparks, section 1. America, you flexed your nuclear muscles in our directions 1,054 times over the length of my father's short life. 1,054 catastrophic blooms shattering the desert floor, confounding the waters and the heavens. It took us years, decades even, to realize the full arc of our swing. Before you, America, you buckled your own soldiers down in the trenches repeatedly. They prayed before you and you revealed their hand bones glowing beneath their skin. Pigs squilled in aluminum barrels all around ground zero. Ranchers wept before discolored cattle. You strolled onto playgrounds waving your Geiger counters over children, frightened by the arrhythmic crackles and clicks. America, your mouth was one round radio speaker repeating over and over that you would never harm us as you stroked your two-headed lambs and straddled your babies. My father was so small when you began to powder his milk teeth and bones with your radiation. It drifted across the southwest as quiet as pollen, while his body swung through time like a net, gathering up your shining particulates until one day his DNA lit up in a conflagration of letters. America, the last time you flexed your nuclear muscles in our direction, my father was almost dead from cancer. You called your final test divider and never once looked back. Still, he believed in you until his last monitored breath. America, face resplendent, amber eyes blazing, my father's ruination. When he died, his curled hand looked like it still clutched at your garment's bright hem. When my father returns, his hair will be as soft and white as thistle seed. And everywhere he goes, he'll shuffle his feet like an old man in the only shoes that still fit him. One hand will drag an oxygen tank as small as a travel bag behind him. The other will grip a long tube connected to a port in his belly. As I clamber toward my father's house, I realize I no longer love this drive through the Salt River Canyons, horseshoe turns and death drops. The way its walls hide a car wreck in every hatcheted fold. The way shadows pool beneath its dusty scrub. How the road shivers like a congregant moved by the spirit, or how my siblings are always there waiting for me on the other side to watch my faith unbraid into rivulets with less and less water. But I have come this way to pick a fight with my sisters and my brothers, to scrap with them until our raised voices throw sparks, threaten to burn down this wilderness of grief, because this is how was summoned the ghost of my father, who wanted to remain in this life. And he will appear in a doorway, his new hair transparent against his gray green skin, the only part of him undiminished, the quantum of light in his eyes. And he'll ask us, what are you fighting about? Desperate to be himself again. And we'll say, nothing that matters. And would you like a glass of water? And here, let us help you back to bed.
when I was reading the book, I was just very interested with how many of the poems deal with Christianity and you growing up Christian. And I also grew up Christian, even though I do know the practice. I grew up Catholic in particular, and I started to wonder whether you see it as like a devotion or something, or whether you're sort of like interrogating that as well.
Yeah. Sorry. Did you all heard that?
Huh?
Yeah. You want me to? Oh, maybe we should. By the time we finish this, we're going to be experts at it. So, so I do think, as a person who doesn't practice my faith anymore, I do think that where I feel the closest to something that feels like faith or God or is in text. So I do read scripture quite a bit. I study scripture, and so I do think writing is an act of devotion, and I think remembrance of family feels like an act of devotion to me as well. So yeah, that's a really good question, and should we just go back and forth? Like now I can ask you a question about your relationship with faith, or do you want to get yours out?
Okay, yeah, I can also talk about that as well. So when I was writing this, I did not think about religion that much, but it was interesting that when I got this sort of thing where you receive that call, oh, then you've won this prize, and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm happy. And then I read somewhere where they were talking about how you just experience that happiness for a very brief time, and you're like, oh, this is going to be a real book. And now let me go back and read it. And I was reading it and I was like, there is a lot of religion here. There's a lot about growing up Christian, and so let me just give you the picture. So my mom would wake us like 5 a.m. in the morning, and would say 5 decades of the rosary. I don't know who is Catholic here, and would say 5 decades of the rosary, and we would also read readings from the missal, and then she would preach to us based on those readings, and then we would pray for like an hour. So I grew up very, very, very religious, and in our sitting room there is an altar with the figurines of Jesus and Mary, and and my mom would come back even on Saturdays, and the only thing she would watch would be religious channels. And so I grew up really, really religious, and it seemed like that was the only thing I knew about her, and that was why it was also reflecting in the writing as well. But very close before I left Nigeria, I just lost interest, and speaking about after my mom died, I was also speaking with my sister, and she was like, yeah, that she hasn't gone to church in a very long time because she just felt betrayed by it. But for me, I think I also have that belief that writing poetry is an act of devotion to the religion of poetry. It's,
For sure.
um,
It is its own religion.
yeah,
For sure. I think that some of it packed into that question is like, there can be a self-consciousness. You can feel self-conscious around dealing with religious text in a secular world. We live in a secular country, and like, how's the wider world going to be? Are they going to misinterpret? Are they going? Is it? I don't know. I worry sometimes if people are going to find it too precious, or and I'm old, so I'm just like, I don't give a shit. I'm just going to write what I write. But I also think now that the book is out there, I'm finding these people I'm finding other writers who are really interrogating their faith, or the structures of faith that they grew up with, and the power imbalances within those faiths, and in a way that, and some of them haven't left their faith yet, and some of them have, and in a way that's really beautiful, and I'm creating community around those writers, and I think that's that's interesting writing to me. I just love it. I love the text. So even if I'm outside of the system of faith that I grew up in, I do really love the text.
that's the
And
Bible.
the iconography, the Bible. We have a little bit extra. We got some extra books. I got some extra books. But I do really love. I especially love the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament. And but yeah, I do find a lot of comfort in the text. As far as like, it's just familiar. It's generated authority. And you Catholics have like all the good iconography, like Mary. Oh my gosh, such good iconography.
Yeah, one thing I particularly like about Catholicism, it's the rituals. You go to church and everything is scripted in a way, and there's just no way to go against this script. So when I go, it's when I miss the rituals itself.
So one of the questions I have for you, and I don't know how many of you guys did your homework and read the books in advance before you got here. Did you all read the 2 books before you got here? Not yet. Well, you guys will read them tonight. I mean, you can email me. But so Okwudili writes with this really beautiful clarity, like this, and the clarity feels necessary to me for the subject matter. And you came to poetry by way of fiction. You wrote fiction first. But I am wondering, because I'm always like, how can I write better? Is that a natural way of writing, or did you revise toward greater clarity because of the subject matter?
Well, thank you.
It's a craft question.
Yeah. So we met at AWP.
We did. Oh, I'll tell you the story in a minute. It's hilarious.
So there was this foundation, Granum Foundation, that they helped me when I was also writing this book. And we met at AWP and we went for lunch. And I was also talking about how it's very important for me that my poems have to be clear. I feel like it's an ethical position I've taken because none of my parents have a university education, and if I am to write about them, they have to be able to read it and understand it. So that's where
I love that.
it comes from. That it has to be as clear as possible.
Yeah, it's
So,
beautiful.
I mean, that's a very short answer. More.
No, I love that.
Well,
Yeah, because I think a lot about how like a word is like a freight car, and it has like freight inside of it, and how it's a bummer car if the freight doesn't get to where it's going. Like if you don't receive the meaning, then the car's not working, right? So what good did it do? But then I write, and I think this is from growing up in poverty. This is my sister, everybody, my sister Kristen. So she's witness to everything that's in the book. She'll tell you the parts that aren't true entirely. But I think there's a self-consciousness for me, because we grew up without a ton of access, that I try to be fancier. And I read a lot of, like I did read a lot of, we had a Reader's Digest anthology of poetry, and I read it obsessively. And I think that I think we grew up using the King James Version of the Bible, which is hoity-toity, and I think that we had a way of speaking around that book that it was a little elevated, even though everybody had like lower levels of education. So they were always trying to use like 3 or 4 syllable words when 2 syllable words would do. And so I think sometimes I'm trying to crowd more language into my work, and I find myself having to pare back. But your work does such a beautiful job of, yeah, oh no, it's stunning. I read the whole thing all the way through, and it does such a beautiful job. Each poem does such a beautiful job of like, of being very clear, but being very illuminated. It has a lot of illumination in the clarity. So yeah, I was curious how much revision that took. That's really.
Oh yeah, when I started writing fiction, let me put this story out. So I studied chemical engineering for undergrad, and then I hated it. I was like, and when I was writing poetry, when I was writing fiction, I wanted my poetry to be better. No, I wanted my fiction to be better. So I felt like if I go to read poetry, my fiction lines would be better. And then when I read poetry, I was like, I think I can do this. And many of my friends told me don't try it. But yeah, I think I've always done things that people tell me not to do. The easiest way to make them not do something is by telling you not to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I have one question, also related to religion, but so there are like numerous mentions of Moses, the biblical Moses, in the poet, and in fact one of them is titled the mention of Moses. I'm just curious, what is it about him that interests you?
Yeah. So Moses. So I had, okay, so Moses, I had it in my head. Moses, the Moses sonnet crown in the center of the book. There's a sonnet crown at the center of the book that is about this disembodied I, who's kind of like a persona, but is really me, but is like a way cooler version of me, that exhumes the body of Moses from an undisclosed location in Judea and reinterrs him in Apache County, Arizona. And it's really like, I was really grappling with how I could claim my own authority within, from the patriarchal structure of the faith I was raised in. Because that is what I struggled with when I deconverted from my faith, was that I didn't feel like I had enough authority as a woman within my faith. And so Moses is kind of like a conceit that ends up, really he's like a metaphor for my father, but also for my faith. And just conveniently, Brigham Young was also called the Moses the Southwest. So he's doing a lot of functions in that story. But I also just really, Moses is a heartbreaking story to me because I wrestle with the aspects of God that I find cruel. And Moses not being allowed to enter the promised land after wandering so long in the desert it feels cruel to me. And Moses not being allowed to look at God and being told you can look at my back, that feels like cruel to me. And those are metaphors for like these aspects of God that I find very cruel. And so kind of it functions in a lot of ways. And I contemplated him as a figure while I was working on this book about extricating myself sort of from the faith legends. I don't know if it works. I have a book, and you guys can email me and tell me. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. I have one.
Okay.
Last one.
Okay, I have a really hard one for you though. So
Okay.
if you
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't, if you're uncomfortable asking it, it's a really tender question. I want to talk to you a little bit about guilt and how guilt sort of enters halfway through and it comes up in a couple. Is that an uncomfortable question?
No.
It comes up sort of, it becomes a little thicker towards the middle and then more pervasive towards the end. And it's not just, there's guilt about leaving your community and your culture and being in America as your mother's passing. But there's also guilt around your orientation and guilt around, and that I just want to know how much distance between writing these poems and publication of these poems. Like, I mean, I had years between me and the writing of these poems, or between the event of these poems and the writing of them. How emergent were these poems, and how did you navigate?
So I think I'm thinking about the oldest poem here. It's yeah, it's I could still hear him whistle. Yeah, I was still in Nigeria, and then the last one, the latest poem. I would never call it the latest one. The most current one was the last thing, and I wrote that here in Minneapolis. Yeah, so I moved here August 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
So recent.
So it's recent. But I think the other one was like 2017. But I think there's another question inside that question. So I can ask it again.
Well, I think because, and you guys will know when you buy this book, the poems feel like you're reading them, they feel as if they're being written as everything is happening.
Okay, yeah, there's also something I wanted to add. One like very, very good advice that one of my mentors gave me was write as if your parents are dead. Yeah, it really helps. Because there's that inhibition you have, and it's kind of funny that I wrote some of these poems, and when my siblings asked me for like last night, my elder brother asked for the poem for the book, and I was like, oh, I can send it to you, and then I gave him the caveat that whenever you see it, don't ask me about it because I had written it with the idea. I had written the book with the idea that that I was in the US, that I was away from that the physical distance was like very clear. I think it's also easy when you travel out of the place to write about that place. You you can clearly see that place for what it is, rather than when you're there. So definitely, some of the poems that were written. Some of them were also written when I was in a residence at in Okwudili, and funny story. In my application to the residency, I said I was going to write nature poetry, which was supposed to be my thesis, and I got this advice from the director of the annual writers workshop that students who are on their fellowships. So if you're on a fellowship, you don't get to teach your first year. You just receive free money, free ride, and many students who are on fellowship their first year tend not to finish their books. And because I was in the fellowship, I was like, okay, it means I have to finish my book in my first year, so that when I start teaching, I don't have to bother about writing a book. That was my thesis, the nature poetry. But when I was there, I was really, really sad, which happens to me almost at every residency I've been to. And I was like, because they can be very lonely. And so I concentrated on writing about my mom rather than and the moment I had 50 pages of poems, I was like, okay, this can be a book. So that's.
Oh, I wish I had 30 pages.
If you've been to residencies.
I've been,
Yeah, and the thing is that they make you feel guilty that you're getting this free time and you're not using it. So it sort of forces you to do something. So I have one question there. So I think towards the end, there are two mentions of the temple veil, which in the Bible served as a literal barrier between God and human beings. Don't take this question personally. Do you feel like you are trying to rip that veil by writing poems?
That I'm trying to what?
Rip that veil.
Oh, rip the veil.
Yeah.
I don't think that I thought of that because, I have there's also a veil that is worn in the Mormon temple. The bride will wear in the Mormon temple, and I think I was referencing. If I think the poems I'm thinking of, I'm trying to create I had this thing where, so you know how Catholics use Catholic iconography in poems, and I'm like, why can't Mormons do that? And so there is in the collection, there are references to Mormon symbolism and Mormon iconography that some of the poems weren't even picked up because nobody knew what I was talking about. And so I used the word garments in one poem that in a workshop somebody said, you can't just use a term as generic as garments because they thought I just meant clothing. And I was like, no, I'm talking about an actual thing called a garment, which is a sacred clothing that Mormon people wear. So I think I might be referencing, but I am aware of the temple veil that in the Jewish temple as well. And so I'd have to look, but I think I'm referencing the Mormon temple veil.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, how could you possibly know? Unless you convert, you won't know. So, yeah. But I like that reading of it. It's very smart. And then my last question for you is what, and this might be also a very silly question, but what do you think about the experience with watching your mother's illness and leaving your mother while she was ill? Like, what about that necessitated poetry as a form rather than fiction or nonfiction? Why did you choose to write about this in poetry rather than another form which you already have used in the past?
I have written about my mom in almost every form, and even my first published poems were like 12. I remember one time I had there was this issue of Three Penny, and my mom was cleaning. This was a Saturday, and she opened it, and she saw this poem. It was about her sister, who, because I'm Igbo, and we have this like tradition where if a woman's husband dies, the husband's brother, the late husband's brother, can come and claim all the things he has. And so I wrote about it. And my mom read it and was like, so the stories I tell you is what you're using to write poems. And this is not even how it happened. So, yeah, in fact, the novel I'm working on now, as my thesis, there is a woman in it, and she's the main character. She's the point of view, and she's just like my mom. She's religious, and she's sort of like also pressurizing her daughter to succeed, to have ambition, so she's always appeared in one form or the other in my writing.
I mean, that makes sense. Moms are like really good. Moms are huge. They loom large.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I grew up very close to my mom. Unlike my brothers, my brothers like work with my dad. And maybe that's why I know how to cook. So,
Do you guys have questions for us?
Can you tell the story about that?
Oh my gosh, okay. So, do you all know about AWP? It's the Writers and Publishing, American Writers.
Association of Writing Programs.
Oh, yeah, it's about, I always forget that it's about school and not about writing. But, so we were both there, which I only knew because I follow Okwudili on Instagram.
We follow each other.
Yeah. I stalk him, and it's kind of, if you haven't been, it's complete chaos. I work for a journal that was there, but I also had a reading, and I think you had events. You were brought out by an organization, and so it's really, really busy, and it's like 10,000 people. It's ridiculous. And so while we're there, we get your email comes, and it says, here's the run of show, and you're going to be in conversation. And I'm like, oh no, I thought it was just going to be a reading. So I look him up to see where he's going to be in the world, and hoping that I can buy the book, because there's no time to go to a bookstore. We're booked. So I see that you have a signing, but I don't know when it is. You weren't signing but I'm going to go to the table where the signing was supposed to be, and he's there, and I go running up, and look at me, I look like a crazy old person. I'm running up the table, and I said, we need to read each other's books. That's all I say. I don't introduce myself.
By that time, I also haven't read the email as well.
So I just said, we need to read each other's books. And he says, I don't know who you are. Oh, that's so embarrassing. So then I'm like, I'm Alyssa Cherry. We're going to be reading together in Minneapolis. And he was so cool. Like, he was just like, real smiley. Okay.
When you talk about that smiling thing, so I had lunch with these guys that run Grandin Foundation, and they were like saying that you had the weirdest response when they called you that that you were the first runner up, that you just burst into laughter, and they were like, wow, this nowadays I've not experienced something like that. But yeah, it was. I think it's also because I grew up in a family where we made fun of each other.
Yeah.
Sometimes I did not like it, but you have to like get used to it because the moment you show that you're not liking it, it's just giving them more ammunition. So you
Yeah.
just pretend like, oh, I'm enjoying it and they're going to stop. So, yeah.
Yeah, so then I was like, well, I'll buy your book.
yeah.
And then he said, well, I need your book. And do you have your book? And I was like, no, I have it at the hotel room, which is not helpful. And then he said, well, I only have Venmo. And then I said, well, do you think I don't know how to use Venmo? Like, I don't know how to use Venmo. And then I tried to use Venmo and I couldn't make the Venmo roll. It was just like a comedy of errors. And then I finished the book. And then I had to find him the next day. It was just me just being an idiot. Like I can just walk up to someone who has never seen my face and say, we need to read each other's books. And he was going to go, oh, Alyssa, of course, yes, let's read each other's books. Didn't you stalk me on the internet? I thought everybody did that. I have a lot of time on my hands.
So the thing is that I'm hardly ever on Instagram. Whatever posts on Instagram is from Facebook.
He's not like me.
Yeah. So no, I'm almost every time I'm on Facebook. Yeah. So whatever posts on Facebook also posts on Instagram. So.
Well, I'm not on Facebook. I'm not.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people think Facebook is for old people. So, but I prefer Facebook because people tend to be kind of it. Yeah. They don't tend to drag people there, and you just find their kinder versions. But if you want to see their worst versions, go to Twitter.
And now we're good friends, and so you'll recognize me next time I run up to you in a weird space and scream at you at the top of my lungs about books. So yeah. Any other questions?
What were your experiences creating the collection? Were there poems that you wanted to include and didn't? I know that you mentioned that you very much wanted to include one after your mother had passed. Well, kind of what was the give and take when you were compiling?
So, for me, the collection that I actually sent had the idea behind it was, oh, my mom survived cancer, and when my mom passed, I had to change the tone of the poems. Yeah, in fact, I had to even change some of the poems to past tense. Yeah, and yeah, that was it for me. And it was easy to arrange because I just arrange it as you think it happened. But some of the things that went out during the editing process were poems about my dad, or not really poems about my dad, poems that had mentions of my dad. My editors, take it out. You should concentrate on this, and I think it was helpful because it sort of also reminds me of one of the lessons I got at Iowa was that you should write about every character from a place of love, even though you don't like them. And I think I was just angry with my dad, and it was coming up in the poems, and so I agree that it was beneficial that I had to take those out. And also because I'm an editor as well, I have to just say yes to whatever and the editor says.
I had sent mine out over the course of the year. I sent mine out to several contests and was roundly rejected, maybe like 13 times. And then when the last rejection came in from that round, I broke the book and reordered it completely, and then sent it out 3 times and got picked up. So I think there might have been some new poems that ended up in that round, and I think the poems were stronger. Maybe I worked on some poems through workshops and things like that. But I think the big significance in the second round that I sent it out was that I pulled the sonnet crown together. Nobody understood that it was a sonnet crown. Like they were too far apart and nobody could keep track of the sonnet crown. And I also shaped the book itself like a sonnet with a whole top. So the sonnet crown became a whole top, and then the third section becomes the sort of resolution of that rhetorical sort of like the first part of the book becomes the setup of the argument, and the third part becomes the resolution. I mean, it's a really loose sonnet, but it's yeah. So, and I did sneak. It was a judged contest, so I didn't get to do a lot of. I only got to edit for punctuation after it was accepted. Except I did sneak one. I snuck one poem in that I was like, how did that should have been in when I submitted it to the contest. I don't know how I missed that. And so when they were like, remember, don't change anything major, I was like, okay. And then I just popped that poem in there and crossed my fingers and they didn't catch it. And I never told them that. Don't tell him. But you got to work with an editor.
Oh yeah. In fact, I got 4 rounds of edits. They wanted to send me another one, and I was like, I had to email them that I do not want any rounds of edits anymore because because of the topic of the collection. Yeah, I just thought it was too much. Yeah.
So if you guys are shopping a book, go to Autumn House Press. The editors seem to really work.
Yeah, and yeah, I think they only publish like, I don't know, about 4. Yeah, we have like the prize, but the prize I won was outside of it's the Center for African American Poetry and Poetics. It's based in the University of Pittsburgh, so and the publisher is also based in Pittsburgh, so I guess that's why they've always been in collaboration.
One more question?
More?
One more?
Wow, we answered all your questions. Very good of us. Thank you all for coming.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.